Rome, a city of legions, iron, and discipline. For centuries, her strength came from the land. Soldiers marched across Italy like thunder, but when they reached the coast, their power stopped where the waves began. The sea, that vast, unpredictable frontier, belonged not to Rome, but to others. In 264 BCE, when Carthage, a powerful city across the Mediterranean, challenged Rome's rising influence, exposed Rome's weakness. Carthage ruled the sea. Its navy was unmatched, filled with skilled sailors who grew up breathing salt air. The Romans? They were farmers, soldiers, engineers, but not sailors. Inside the Senate, Gaius stood up, slamming his fist on the marble table. "We can't let Carthage control our fate," he said. "If Rome is to survive, she must rule not only the land, but the waves." Marcus, a general of many battles, frowned. "Our men are not made for ships. The sea is treacherous. One storm can destroy an army." "Vero," the young officer, replied. "Then we learn, sir. Like we always do. We learn, or we die." The Senate agreed. The decision was made. Rome would build a navy from nothing. That day marked the beginning of one of the greatest transformations in Roman history, when a land empire decided to master the sea. Rome had no shipbuilders, no sailors, and no experience. But they had determination and spies. When a Carthaginian warship wrecked on an Italian shore, Rome found its miracle. Marcus examined the massive ship lying broken on the sand. "This," he said, "is how we begin." The Roman engineers quickly got to work. Under Lucius, a brilliant craftsman, they copied the Carthaginian design plank by plank. Within 2 months, shipyards buzzed with life, hammering, sawing, and shouting. Thousands of workers built 100 ships without ever having sailed one. Training the crews was harder. Farmers and soldiers stumbled on decks, seasick and confused. Vero joked, "Half of us can't even swim." But Marcus was relentless. "You'll learn. The sea will not defeat a Roman heart." Soon, the Tiber River filled with new wooden monsters, Roman quinquiremes, rough, heavy, but powerful. Rome had built her first navy. But would it float or fail? Rome had ships, but still no sailors. Against the skilled Carthaginians, their inexperience showed. The Romans needed an edge, something uniquely their own. That's when Lucius invented the corvus, a boarding bridge. A giant wooden plank with a metal spike that could drop onto an enemy ship, locking in place. The sea would become land again, where Roman soldiers ruled. Lucius demonstrated it before the commanders. "Once the corvus drops, our men will storm across like a bridge. The enemy's decks will become our battlefield." Marcus smiled for the first time. "We'll fight sea battles as if they were land battles." Brilliant. The idea was simple, brutal, and perfect. The Romans wouldn't try to outsail the Carthaginians. They'd outfight them. As the new navy prepared for its first battle, thousands of soldiers practiced boarding drills, shouting, "For Rome." The sound echoed across the docks, the birth cry of a naval empire. The first real test came at Mylae, 260 BCE. The Roman fleet, 120 ships, faced the mighty Carthaginian navy. The sea roared with oars and wind. Hanno, the Carthaginian admiral, laughed when he saw the Roman fleet. Landmen in boats. This will be easy. But Marcus waited calmly. As the Carthaginian ships charged, the Romans held position. When the first enemy vessel approached, Marcus shouted, "Corvus, down!" The great boarding bridge crashed onto the Carthaginian deck with a thundering sound. Roman legionaries swarmed across, swords flashing. The sea turned red. Hanno realized too late, this was not a naval duel anymore. It was a land battle on water. One by one, Carthaginian ships fell. Rome won her first great sea victory. The cheers of the soldiers echoed back to the coast. Rome, once a land power, had defeated the masters of the sea. Victory filled Rome with pride. Statues were built, songs were sung, and Marcus was hailed as the first admiral of Rome. The Senate declared, "We are now masters of the sea." But the sea had other plans. Months later, As the Roman fleet sailed home loaded with soldiers and glory, black clouds formed. Winds howled. Waves rose like mountains. Marcus stood at the bow, gripping the rail. "Hold the line," he shouted, but nature does not obey men. One by one, ships vanished into the storm. The mighty fleet, over 250 ships, was torn apart. When dawn came, only fragments floated on the waves. Thousands were dead. Rome wept. The same sea they thought they conquered reminded them of its power. Yet in tragedy, Rome found resolve. They would rebuild again. The storm had destroyed nearly everything: ships, supplies, and spirit. Many in the Senate said, "The gods do not want us at sea." But others refused to give up. Gaius stood once again before the Senate, his voice echoing through the marble hall. "We lost ships, not courage. Rome does not retreat from a sea." Varro returned to the shipyards, staring at the wrecked timbers along the Tiber River. He found Lucius there, hammering in silence. "We'll start again," Varro said quietly. Lucius looked up. "We'll build better this time, stronger hulls, lighter decks. The sea will learn to fear us." Men from all across Italy were summoned. Farmers, smiths, carpenters. Day and night they rebuilt. The rhythm of hammers became the heartbeat of Rome. It wasn't just about ships anymore, it was about pride. Each plank nailed, each sail raised, was a declaration: Rome does not break. After 2 years, the docks were full again, new fleets, new hope. The Roman navy had been reborn from wreckage. By 256 BCE, Rome's navy was stronger than ever. 330 ships, the largest fleet the world had ever seen, gathered off Sicily. Their goal: invade Africa itself. Consul Marcus Atilius Regulus led the fleet. "If Carthage rules the sea, we'll bring the war to her gates," he declared. As the fleet set sail, it looked like an iron forest. Hundreds of masts were slicing the sea in perfect rhythm. Roman soldiers, once terrified of water, now sang over the waves. Carthage, shocked by Rome's audacity, sent their own massive fleet to stop them. The two powers clashed near Cape Ecnomus in one of history's largest naval battles. The Corvus bridges dropped again. The Romans turned the sea into chaos. Men fought, ships burned, waves turned red. When it ended, Carthage had lost over 100 ships. Rome had done the impossible. They ruled the waves. Regulus landed his army in Africa, the first Roman to set foot on enemy soil. When Regulus marched into Africa, victory seemed near. Towns surrendered, and the Carthaginian army fell back. But in desperation, Carthage hired a foreign general, Xanthippus, a Spartan mercenary. He studied Regulus' tactics carefully. "Romans fight bravely," he said, "but they fight like they're still on land." The two armies met near Tunis. Under the African sun, elephants thundered forward. Regulus' formations broke. Roman courage met Carthaginian cunning and lost. Regulus was captured. His army was crushed. For the first time, Rome's confidence trembled. In chains, Regulus still told his captors, "Rome never quits. Even if I die here, she will return." He was sent back to Rome later, under oath to advise peace. Instead, he told the Senate, no peace with Carthage. Then he returned to Africa, knowing death awaited him. Rome mourned his heroism, but learned from his defeat. Years turned into a grind of rebuilding and loss. Rome would construct new fleets, only to see them wrecked by storms or sunk by Carthage. The cost was unbearable: men, money, and faith. Senators debated endlessly. "How many more ships can we lose?" Gaius demanded. Varro answered, "As many as it takes." Lucius redesigned ships again and again, lighter, faster, stronger. But Carthage, experienced and wealthy, continued to dominate the sea. Rome's resilience, however, was unmatched. Every disaster became a lesson. Every loss, a blueprint. Farmers became sailors. Soldiers became mariners. By the late 250s, Rome had transformed itself into something no one thought possible: a true maritime power. The war dragged on for over a decade. Neither side gave up. It wasn't just about Sicily or trade routes anymore. It was about pride, survival, and destiny. By 242 BCE, both empires were exhausted. Rome was nearly bankrupt. Carthage, too, struggled to fund its fleet. Then, a final chance appeared. Wealthy Roman citizens pooled their money to build one last fleet, privately funded, born of desperation and pride. Catullus, a calm and strategic leader, took command. He trained his men endlessly on land before ever setting sail. "The sea will not forgive mistakes," he said. When the fleet finally launched, it carried not just weapons, but the hopes of an entire civilization. As they sailed toward the Aegates Islands, where Carthage's supply fleet was expected, Catullus whispered to Varro, "One battle decides the fate of Rome." The sea was calm. The wind favored the Romans. They waited, silent, ready. The final act of the First Punic War was about to begin. March 10th, 241 BCE, the dawn of destiny. The Roman fleet lay in wait near the Aegates Islands. Carthage's supply ships appeared on the horizon, heavy with food and reinforcements. The wind blew fiercely against the Carthaginians. Their ships struggled forward, while the Romans waited, sails full, ready. Catullus raised his arm. For Rome, hundreds of Roman ships surged forward. The sea erupted in thunder. The Corvus was gone. Now Rome relied on skill, not tricks. Years of practice paid off. They rowed as one, turned sharply, and struck with precision. Carthaginian vessels, heavy and slow, broke apart. Flames spread. The air filled with smoke and screams. Hanno's last words, before his ship sank, were bitter. "So, Rome rules the sea now." When the battle ended, the sea was silent, except for the crackle of burning ships. Catullus stood on the deck, wind whipping his cloak, and said softly, "At last we have learned." Rome had won. The First Punic War was over. The war was won, but the cost was staggering. Over 2 decades of fighting had drained Rome's treasury, destroyed thousands of ships, and taken countless lives. Catullus returned to Rome as a hero, but his eyes carried the weight of every sailor lost. "Victory," he said quietly, "is never free." In the Senate, Gaius declared, "Rome now rules the Mediterranean. Let all who challenge her beware." Yet beneath the applause was exhaustion. Fields were empty. Families were broken. Lucius, the old engineer, watched new ships being repaired and whispered, "We've conquered the sea, but I wonder, has the sea conquered us?" Still, the people celebrated. Bells rang. Flowers were thrown in the streets. Rome's first great overseas empire, Sicily, became Roman territory. The dream had begun. The sea that once terrified Rome now bowed before her. But far across the water, Carthage smoldered with revenge. The next storm was already rising. Years passed, and Rome transformed again. Wealth flowed in from Sicily and new trade routes. The docks of Ostia were filled with ships, not just warships, but merchant fleets carrying grain, wine, and gold. Gaius told the Senate, "Our destiny is tied to the sea now. Whoever rules the waves, rules the world." Young Quintus, a rising naval officer, listened in awe. He had grown up in a Rome that feared no storm. To him, the Navy wasn't just defense, it was opportunity. Varro trained the next generation. "Remember," he told them, "our first ships sank. Our first sailors drowned. But Rome learned because we refused to stop." The Roman fleet became a symbol of innovation, discipline, and pride. They built lighthouses, harbors, and naval academies. The spirit of the legions had merged with the power of the sea. The age of Rome's maritime empire had begun. But peace never lasts long in history. Across the sea, in Carthage, a young commander was rising. Hannibal Barca, son of Hamilcar. As a child, he swore eternal hatred for Rome. Years later, he would lead armies through the Alps and bring war to Italy's heart. But for now, Carthage was rebuilding quietly, patiently. In Rome, Gaius sensed the coming danger. "Do not grow comfortable," he warned the Senate. "Carthage remembers." Quintus, now a naval captain, replied, "Let them come. Rome's ships rule the waves. They can't touch us." But Hannibal was not a man of the sea. He was a man of mountains and cunning. His revenge would not come by ship, but by foot, through snow and blood. The First Punic War had made Rome a sea power. The next would test everything she had built. Years later, Varro, now old and gray, stood at the harbor watching the sun set over the sea he once feared. Around him, new ships gleamed, faster and stronger than ever before. Quintus approached. "The sea belongs to Rome now," he said proudly. Varro smiled faintly. "No, Quintus. The sea belongs to no one. We only borrow it, until it reminds us who's in charge." He looked toward the horizon. "Remember our first ships? We copied our enemy, stumbled, and sank. But we learned. The sea taught us everything: patience, courage, and humility." Gaius Minor nodded, taking notes. "And the next war, sir?" Varro turned away. "The next war will come. But when it does, we'll be ready. Because Rome has learned to rule the waves." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the reflection shimmered across the water like gold, the eternal symbol of a power born from struggle. The Second Punic War began not on the sea, but in the mountains. Hannibal, the Carthaginian prodigy, led his army through the Alps, bringing elephants across snow and death. Untold. In the Senate, Fabius paced nervously. "He has done what no enemy has ever dared, invaded Italy itself." Quintus clenched his fist. "Our legions will stop him." But Hannibal shattered Rome's armies at Trebia, at Trasimene, and then at Cannae, where 70,000 Romans fell in one day. It was the greatest disaster in Roman history. And yet, amidst the horror, one truth stood firm: the sea was still Roman. Hannibal had no fleet. Rome's navy controlled every supply line, every coastal city. The sea became Rome's shield. While Hannibal burned the fields of Italy, Rome's ships brought food, troops, and silver from her provinces. Hannibal could win battles, but he could never win the sea. While Hannibal ravaged Italy, Rome struck back, not with land battles, but with ships. The navy became the lifeline of the Republic. Quintus commanded convoys across the Mediterranean, carrying grain from Sardinia, Sicily, and Spain. "If the roads belong to Hannibal," he said, "then the waves belong to us." Carthaginian raiders tried to intercept the Roman supply lines, but Gaius Minor's squadrons hunted them relentlessly. "No food, no army," he reminded his men. Rome's strength wasn't just in swords anymore. It was in logistics. The fleet became a machine of discipline and precision. In the Senate, Fabius announced, "Hannibal fights like a lion." But lions starve when the hunters cut off their food. The seas, once Rome's fear, had become her weapon. As Hannibal rampaged through Italy, a young general named Publius Scipio saw a new path: strike Carthage's allies in Spain. He sailed west with a Roman fleet, landing near Carthago Nova. "We'll take their gold, their ports, and their pride," Scipio declared. Quintus joined him, commanding the ships that surrounded the city's harbor. The assault was daring. Scipio timed the attack with the tides. When the water receded, Roman troops waded across the shallows, surprising the defenders. Hasdrubal, Hannibal's brother, tried to reinforce Spain, but the Roman navy intercepted him. Rome now controlled the western Mediterranean. The tide had turned. For the first time in years, Rome was not just surviving, it was winning. Scipio stood over the captured city and said, "Hannibal fights on land. I'll end this war from the sea." By 204 BCE, Scipio was ready for the final act: the invasion of Africa. The sea that once terrified Rome now carried its armies to victory. At dawn, the fleet set sail from Sicily. Hundreds of ships, banners snapping in the wind, crossed the same waters that Regulus once had. But this time, Rome was ready. Quintus commanded the vanguard. "2 wars, 2 generations," he said. "But this time we finish it." The Roman army landed near Utica. Carthage panicked. Hannibal was recalled from Italy. His long campaign was over. The 2 greatest generals of the age were destined to meet face to face. The sea had carried Rome to her enemy's doorstep once again. 202 BC, the plains of Zama. The final confrontation. Hannibal, The master of tactics faced Scipio, the student who had learned from his every move. The air shimmered with heat. Elephants lined up before the Carthaginian army. Roman legions stood in perfect silence. Quintus watched from a nearby ridge as horns blared. The elephants charged, but Scipio's men opened corridors, letting them pass harmlessly through. Then came the counterattack. Roman cavalry, trained and supplied through years of naval control, swept in from the flanks. Hannibal's lines broke. As dust rose over the desert, Scipio and Hannibal met after the battle. Hannibal said calmly, "The gods gave you victory. Use it wisely." Scipio bowed his head. The war, and Carthage's power, was over. The sea had carried Rome to this triumph. The war was over. Carthage was defeated, her fleets burned, her empire lost. The Mediterranean, once divided, was now a Roman lake. In Rome, crowds filled the streets. Scipio, now called Africanus, was celebrated as a hero. Yet he told the Senate, "We did not win with luck. We won because we learned." Fabius nodded. "You turned farmers into sailors, soldiers into captains. You taught Rome to breathe the sea." Quintus looked out from the harbor of Ostia. Dozens of ships glided across calm waters, sails shining under the sun. For the first time, peace filled the waves. Rome had mastered not just land, but water. Her legions marched on decks now. Her merchants traded from Spain to Syria. The sea had become the heart of the empire. Peace brought prosperity. Where warships once fought, merchant vessels now sailed. Roman ports buzzed with trade. Grain from Egypt, silver from Spain, silk from the East. Marcus Junius, a wealthy trader, told Quintus, "Once we feared the waves. Now they feed us." Quintus smiled. "The sea that once destroyed us has made us rich." Rome built lighthouses along the coasts, carved new harbors, and filled the waters with ships bearing the eagle insignia. The navy now guarded trade routes, protecting every merchant who flew Rome's banner. Senator Fabius told the Senate, "Our navy is not just for war. It is the wall that guards our wealth." The Mediterranean became what poets called Mare Nostrum, our sea. Decades passed. Republic turned to empire. Augustus rose as Rome's first emperor, and with him came peace across the Mediterranean. Standing at a naval parade in Ostia, Augustus declared, "Our ancestors fought to rule the sea. I will ensure no one ever challenges that rule again." Elder Quintus, now gray-haired, saluted. "The sea is calm because Rome is strong." Drusus, a young officer beside him, whispered, "Do you think there will ever be another Carthage?" Quintus smiled faintly. "There will always be enemies. But remember this, Rome doesn't just fight on land anymore. She fights on the waves, and the waves answer only to her." The age of the Pax Romana, Roman peace, began. For centuries, the sea stayed silent under Rome's watch. Centuries later, Rome's navy remained unmatched. But many forgot how it began, with one shipwreck, one idea, and one act of courage. Historian Livy visited the docks and wrote, "The sea once mocked Rome. Now it sings her name." Drusus, walking beside an old sailor named Cassian, asked, "Do you ever fear the sea?" Cassian laughed. "Every sailor fears the sea. But Rome taught us that fear can become mastery." Together they watched workers repair hulls, paint prows, and carve eagles into wood. Each ship was more than a vessel. It was a story, a reminder of struggle, loss, and triumph. Rome's empire rested on two things, her legions and her ships. The sea sparkles beneath the golden light of evening. A Roman trireme glides across calm waters, its oars moving like the heartbeat of history. The ghosts of Rome's sailors whisper through the wind. Marcus the general, Varro the fighter, Lucius the engineer, Scipio the conqueror, Quintus the teacher. Their voices echo. We feared the sea. We fought it. We learned from it. The camera rises high above the Mediterranean, where ancient waves still roll over forgotten wrecks. Beneath them lie the bones of sailors who turned a city of stone into a global empire. Rome's walls may have crumbled, her emperors fallen, but her legacy still floats on every wave. Because once upon a time, Rome learnt to rule the waves.